and a very warm welcome to Canterbury Cathedral. My name is Emma Pennington, and last Friday, the 24th of July, my new book on Julian of Norwich came out. It's called At the Foot of the Cross with Julian of Norwich. In true lockdown style, last night Jonathan and I, and Jonathan is my husband, the Rev'd Dr Jonathan Arnold, the two of us had a conversation with a very nice gin and tonic about my new book, and here it is for you to enjoy.
So what got you thinking about writing a book about Julian of Norwich anyway?
I think, well, I'd always wanted to write something about, and not just about Julian, but also about that whole flowering kind of medieval spirituality that happened around the end of the 14th century. And I guess I do distinctly remember when I was doing my BA, which was in English and medieval studies, wanting very much to write something that made these 14th century texts accessible to a much broader, more popular audience, because they had affected me so much that I wanted other people to be able to share in that, really.
So when was that BA?
So the BA, that was quite a few years ago now. That was I was at university in Exeter from 89 to 92,
right?
Which is when you were at university too, at Oxford.
Exactly,
yeah.
the same time.
Exactly the same time.
Yeah, we were at university at the same time, different places. We didn't know each other existed.
Not at all.
What? So how did you pursue that? Trying to make Julian accessible, or the mystics accessible?
Well, I think, as an undergraduate, and when you first do explore these texts, you kind of get swept up in them a bit, and I'm sure lots of people have said, "Yay, I want to write on Julian," and then you actually begin to realise that there's an enormous body of literature on her. There's a great academic field. And I did have someone who kind of sort of said, well, go and do some work, go and do some research, and then maybe you'll have something to say. And in a sense, it was quite painful to hear at the time, but she was absolutely right. And all the way through my kind of academic work, I always wanted to have the rigour of the academic understanding of the text, and also that knowing that body of writing, and then to be able to speak about Julian with a kind of an original, a sort of friendly voice that was accessible to people, but also knowing that behind that was a lot of research. So my doctorate was actually in Julian of Norwich. And I guess it was really out of that academic work that I really started thinking, okay, it's time now to really write. And it wasn't easy, because I'd written in a very academic style, which I had been taught, and as you know, having a doctorate yourself, it's quite hard to learn that academic style. It's quite tortuous at time, and all the dots and where the commas go, and having to be really, really clear, and also you can't make any presumptions, and then to have to find a kind of a writing voice after that was a bit tortuous in a sense. But you've written a number of books yourself. I mean, did your writing voice sort of naturally come out?
No. all of my books are academic books.
Okay.
All quasi-academic, and they come out of that academic style from the doctorate. So they all have footnotes and endnotes and long bibliographies and and all that. But you've now gone into this kind of more accessible style, which doesn't really have much of that stuff. but what it does have, what's the difference? Right? How have you found writing this, and what's in this really that's come out of your doctorate? What's the difference in the audience? Because an academic readership is a bit different to. I don't know what readership is for this.
Well, I hope this is for someone who knows about Julian, who even has read her in that academic style, that rigour, but also someone who's never heard of her before. And I think one of the ways I found of getting into that academic style was, if you remember, nearly all of the writing of this I did with pencil and paper.
Oh yeah.
So just sit with, a bit like this actually, sit with a gin and tonic at the end of an evening, and just when in the moment, just let it flow. I think one of the ways in that I thought would be helpful for people, because when you pick up Julian as a text, you are reading a 14th century text, and there are some fantastic translations, like the latest one by Barry at Windiot, who's a fantastic Julian scholar in Cambridge, and he makes that translation very accessible. Keep saying that word, but it's true. And yet it's still really hard to read Julian because you're reading a 14th century text. So what I wanted to do for folk as a way in was sort of to find a place of kind of familiarity. And so I went to the greatest text that we are familiar, which is the Bible, and look at how her visions really are a reflection and a meditation and an exploration of key aspects of the Passion narrative. And what I really hoped for folk was after reading this, they would want to read Julian.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be able to introduce that 14th century text and enable her text to be a way into which folk could read it and then lead into their own prayer life. So starting with the Passion narrative, which we are so familiar with, and then what Julian and how she sort of envisions that through her revelations, and then how she explores it through the culture of her time, would make it like encountering the Passion for the first time, and have that kind of refreshing sort of depth of perception of God, which is what Julian gives us at the end of the day. It's just this amazing understanding of what God might be like, what his nature is like, what he does for us on the cross, the whole notion of the Trinity and Christ's love, and the wounds of the Passion, and really enabling us to love God better, which is what she wants us to be able to do from reading her text.
Yeah. I remember many years ago you introduced me to Julian of Norwich, and I was trying to think of, how I might respond to it, and you encouraged me to read Julian, and to be honest, it's quite a hard read. If you just, you start at page 1, it's got all these revelations. How do you encourage people to read Julian, the actual Julian, instead of stuff about Julian?
I think Julian is, a friend of mine who I similarly gave Julian to, and I've given Julian to a number of people, poor souls, and I think she very quickly said, I just can't read this. All I can do is have it on the book, on the side table, either in her study or by her bed, and read very small sections. Read very, very small sections and just allow those to sink in. I'm a real advocate of the text, and that, you know, to know Julian, to understand Julian, read the text. And so many people say, I know Julian, and yet have never read the text. They've read the sort of wonderful bits that have been taken out of Julian and put into little compilations, and they're wonderful to giving an introduction to Julian. But actually those bits are embedded within this whole landscape of writing, but you need to move through that landscape quite slowly. I think that's and in a prayerful manner, really. And she does say things that are uncomfortable for us in the 21st century. You know, she does know where certain folk will end up. We talk about her having a theology of universal salvation. That's extremely debatable if you read the text. That's certainly reading it just from one point of view. So there are things that make us uncomfortable. What she says about fear, what she says about dread, what she says about penance, which is what my doctorate was on. All these things can make us feel uncomfortable, but just constantly reminding, I'm reading a 14th century text. I can't take to this text a 21st century view. I must allow this text to speak to me. I must allow Julian that graciousness just to speak and allow God through her to communicate.
You mentioned the Bible was a really sort of central text when you were looking at this, because this is Julian at the foot of the cross, and so and actually it's published by the Bible Reading Fellowship, isn't it? So you've got a bit of a relationship with BRF, haven't you? Yeah,
I have. I am really grateful that they have published this book for me. I've done a number of things for them. Most of all is our collaboration with the Festival of Prayer in Oxford, which was always a delight, with Karen and Richard. And so I'm really grateful that they kind of took me on as an author, and I've done one of the Holy Habits Bible reflections. So yes, and I wanted to also stay true to, I knew what their readership was, and that sort of tradition they have about the Bible. So which is why I actually only focus on, I think it's only about 5 of her 16 showings. So she has what's known as one Revelation of Divine Love, and it's in 16 parts basically. But it's very interesting. It's not like now I'm having my vision of part 1, and the next night I'm having part 2. They all sort of merge into each other. It's a bit like watching a movie. You know, it's like they sort of coalesce and transpose, and one reflects upon another. But only 5 of them really are rooted in the words of the cross. The others then take us on this kind of not like some of the visionaries that sort of take us into the underworld, or they take us down to hell. She actually is very true to scripture, and she's very true to the tradition of the church, but she explores, for example, she sees God in a point, you know, which is a very Boethian, so seeing God in all things, and then she sees another tableau of being taken up to heaven and seeing the Lord, which again has resonances with many of the feasting in Matthew parables, the parables that have feasting. So she does explore. It's a bit like you know, she at the time, Julian would not necessarily, she wouldn't have been reading the Bible. The Bible was in Latin. and you could have been. It's very dangerous, as you know from your Reformation knowledge, that to have a copy of an English Wycliffe Bible.
And she couldn't read a Latin one.
And she couldn't read a Latin one. She wouldn't have one.
No.
And so all the Bible she heard was through the church.
Right.
So she kind of hears it all, she assimilates it,
Yeah.
and it like becomes part of her being.
Yeah.
And then she talks Bible. You know, she talks the medieval culture. So you can pick out and say, oh, that sounds like Psalm 69 when we go down into the depths. Or that's just like the, you know, the parable of the wedding feast. And there's such resonances. Oh, that's Paul, you know. Or that sounds like Peter walking on the water, you know. And there are lots of little resonances, but it's sort of presented to us so differently and fresh to explain who God is, really.
Right, yeah. So you started writing this book in Oxford, didn't you? And your doctorate finished in Oxford in about 6 years ago. And how this book germinated for a little while, and now we find ourselves in Canterbury.
Yay, there's Bell Harry just there.
So how what's going to happen now? What happens to this book, and what do you do afterwards with Julian of Norwich and English mystics?
That's a really good question, actually. I think one of the things about lockdown for us as a cathedral is that we've really discovered this new ministry of online services. It was very quickly we took the decision that what we did in the cathedral needed to come with us into our homes, and so now the whole of us have quite a ministry of and even you have done a lot of filming with me, and the Dean has been absolutely phenomenal. He does morning prayer every morning, and the number of people who now tune in specifically to watch morning prayer with the Dean and his wonderful cats and tiger licking the cream, I think has been amazing. And we, in addition to that, we filmed a series specifically on Julian, which was Julian of Norwich, a medieval take on lockdown. And to think about, you know, what we were living through, which was basically being locked down in this, well, rather beautiful canonry, and how similar that was to Julian in the 14th century as an anchoress. It might have been in a much smaller space, but the experience was pretty similar. She chose that way of life. We didn't choose that way of life, but there were still comparisons that were really interesting to explore. And so doing that series of 6 parts has been great fun. And I guess with the book, I only wrote on. It must be said, I only wrote on 5 of the 5 of the visions. There are many more visions that Julian wrote, as I said.
So do you think you might write some more?
Well, I think there certainly is great scope to write more on Julian. I've been reading her, for nigh on 35 years, and she's never tired me. So I think then probably, hopefully, we'll see how this one goes.
See how this one goes.
How this one goes.
Hopefully. So this is published now.
Yes, it came out on Friday the 24th of July.
Right.
And now it is available for to buy.
And are we going to have a book launch or something here later in the year? Hopefully.
Well, it would be nice.
Or lockdown permitting, but we'll see.
I think we always thought, didn't we, of having a bit of a shindig in the garden, sort of getting a few...
Something in the garden.
Yeah, a few glasses of champagne and, you know. But, well, everything is still so up in the air, and I'm not sure how you could drink a glass of champagne through a mask these days, you know, sort of lifting up. So I think, I think we will have to see really about having a book launch. But
But
in a
it'll be on
sense, this
sale
is
in
nice.
the Cathedral shop.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
going to be on sale in the Cathedral shop, which
Right.
is fantastic. Yeah, and it's on sale obviously through BRF through there, and it's $9.99, and the real reason for that being slightly more expensive than their usual books is because of the amazing colour pictures.
Oh, yes. Well, that was quite tricky, wasn't it?
Well, it was quite tricky.
Colour picture, because you had to get permission for each of these, and also to publish colour pictures is quite expensive as well, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, and
Yeah.
the dear people at BRF, they did this, they did this for me, and it's come out absolutely in really beautiful, and some of the images, and I can just show you, some of the images are just stunning. I guess why I wanted the images in it was because the medieval world was so visual. And actually, we're a real visual world.
Yep.
So it's another comparison, and so to have what's left of the visual world of the medieval period, and keep making those links, and how she sort of takes her visions and she explains them in this visual sense, which would have been all the medieval world around her.
And I find reading this is that it's not only visual but oral. That it's not the word on the page.
Yeah.
We don't even know if Julian could read. She may have dictated something, or she probably couldn't read Latin, could she? So there's a kind of a visual and an oral sense to how she assimilated the Bible into her spirituality.
It's true, and I have to say I do love reading Julian aloud, because when you read Julian aloud, and in the final, the fifth part of the series, I read a whole chapter aloud, and I read it in the Middle English, so you get all that kind of what the Middle English. All the intonations. I don't read it in a Middle English kind of accent, so that people can still hear it. But when you read Julian out loud like that, you really get that sense of listening. And of course, as you say, in the medieval world, people probably could more often read than they could write. But ladies would have sat around a priest, and the priest would be reading to them from the Bible or from a devotional book, and they would all listen, and maybe not be, because books, as you know, were still very rare and precious commodities. So it wasn't everybody had a super kind of library like we do today. So
manuscripts were expensive, and absolutely.
How to produce them was really was technical, and so I think it's quite unlikely that Julian could write, but she may well have been able to write, but I think she probably could have read. But hearing the word, hearing the word of God, and then reading other religious texts would have been very, very oral, a very oral culture, as you say. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Well, good luck with the book.
Yay!
It's been a bit of a journey. And
well, you've been on the journey with me, and I have to say thanks for being the companion on the journey.
Dipped in and out on the old journey, and this is a fantastic memory. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it is. Well, thank you.